Alright, so recently I was messing around with my 3DS, and years ago I bought all the expansions for Street Pass Mii Plaza, and I decided it was time to finally go and try out many of the mini games that I just didn't give too much attention to, which makes this sort of a good time to go back and look through just everything this had to offer. I'm curious to see what the legacy of Street Pass will be, whether it'll be just sort of completely forgotten at this rate just because we haven't seen a spiritual successor or anything to it, which is really a shame because I really liked the idea. I feel like it could have some untapped potential, and even if it doesn't have that much, I still feel like it was a great social experience, especially like back in college. Like I remember just being around certain people and finding out, oh, they have a 3DS too, and oh, they like this game too. It's a nice conversation starter. Could build some friendships off of it. It's mildly interesting just seeing what games are popular around the area, or just how many 3DSs you find out in the wild. But yeah, I think this is definitely a concept I would like to see brought back in a future platform from Nintendo or someone else. Street Pass Mii Plaza was the central application for it in a way. Like you would need specific games to reap the rewards of Street Pass. Street Pass Mii Plaza, everyone had the opportunity to utilize. As a result, I feel like a lot of stuff was a little bare bones, but we'll get more into specifics right now for each game. The highlight, at least for most people that I know, including myself, was Puzzle Swap, which is really crazy looking back at it because it's such a simple thing, but once again, that social experience of trying to complete a puzzle for a game you like and finding other people who completed it or going for 100% with all the puzzles. I didn't feel like it was as much about getting the cool 3D art that you would get for completing each puzzle, but it was more of the experience of getting there. Find Me was the other pre-installed free game that it came with. And actually something I should probably note right now is even if you didn't have like Street Pass on for whatever reason, that you can still use play coins, so you can still access the games. It's not as ideal, but it's not like you're completely locked out. But Find Me, surprisingly I played through because normally I'm not really big into turn-based, menu-heavy RPG-esque games unless there's a movement tile system, because if it has that, then that's my shit with like Fire Emblem and that. But without that, it normally falls flat for me. But with Find Me, I don't know, you had sort of that fresh experience and idea that a lot of the games would sort of reuse and it would lose a lot of the charm it had in Find Me, which I, and I'm sure many people, played first. But you would get rewarded for street passing certain people a lot, or the color of your Mii's outfit would affect certain aspects of the game. Like I know some of the games, I don't remember if this was one in particular, but it would be beneficial to have more Mii's with the same outfit color in the same session, or there would be certain puzzles or just certain colors that were more effective at certain levels. So it was rewarding to finally get that color. And these gimmicks, at least for Find Me, and there was a second part to Find Me that just sort of picked up where the first one left off. But I don't feel like they overstayed their welcome at this point, and that was enough to sort of keep me engaged with this little gimmick. Mii Force is the first paid game we're going to talk about, and it's probably the best game in the entirety of the software. So unfortunately, it's kind of downhill from here. This is one of a few games here that I feel like could have existed independently from Street Pass, because in itself it's actually a pretty fun game, which is weird to say because it's kind of like a bullet hell space shooter thing, and I'm really not into that sort of thing, but I felt like collecting some of the different weapons through the Mii costume colors, trying them out, and taking on the challenges that they had. I don't feel like they were as hard as a normal game in this genre, But honestly, I really suck at these games, so that was almost a good thing. After that is Flower Town, which it was alright for what it was. It wasn't really my thing. You essentially use the different Miis to collect different seeds to try to breed all sorts of different flowers for a garden that can be customized. And there's like little side missions too you can do that encourage you to get certain breeds and stuff, and there's some wacky ones at the end too. I don't know if the Miis, or I don't really remember if they really affected as much in this one, or even the last one. I don't know if you got a certain rotation of seeds, if you were a certain costume color, or I think something did happen if you frequently street passed someone, but wasn't as memorable as some of the other ways this was handled. Warrior's Way was the first major dud of all this Street Pass software. I like the theming. I feel like it had a general good idea that maybe if the gameplay was a little different, it could have been more fun, but it came down to two approaches. You either grind out and try to build up your army, which is really time consuming. There wasn't like an easy way to skip your recruitments and then you're just sitting there mashing A or B or whatever. Either that or you take your chance, in which it's essentially a best two out of three rock, paper, scissors, in which you can kind of set yourself up to be guaranteed one win and then just hope you get lucky on the other one unless you have a massive army built up. But I kind of kept going with it because I thought maybe they'd do something fun with the final boss. Because, like I said, I feel like they had some interesting things going here. The final boss was even worse, even more disappointing. It was rock, paper, scissors again, but you had to get lucky so many times in total out of how many attempts you got there, and it was more than usual, and no. Just luck-based from what I can tell, and it unfortunately fell flat. Monster Manor is the final paid game of the initial set. This is a game I'm very conflicted on. I feel like it could have been really fun. Like I liked the theming, and I liked the gameplay loop of almost an alternative puzzle swap, where your Miis would give you randomized pieces, and you would have this set board to try to fill out, and having colors connect would get you bonuses, and completing the board, I believe, would also give you a bonus. To me, that was fun. What wasn't fun is that they also had like a combat section, which essentially came down to, maybe I was playing it wrong, but you build up one gun, spam the A button. A little later on, and with some of the bosses, you had to shield occasionally, but then they took forever, and there was really not much room for error with them either. I just got so sick of all that bullshit that I wound up even stopping completing the floors with all the puzzle pieces because you just kept getting interrupted by these combat sections that just weren't fun at all. If they like reworked it, maybe had a boss on every floor, it could have been better. Not only that, but after you complete it, they're like, oh yeah, there's another 20 floors to do. Fuck that. Eventually they introduced two more games. Ultimate Angler is a fishing mini game. Once again, it's fine for what it is, but it's like such an oversaturated market. Like I was even thinking recently about just how many games have a fishing mini game, and this might go a little in depth. Like you can customize a tank to keep your fish in, and you can get like different upgrades and keeps track of all these records and that. I remember I didn't really like the bait mechanic, which was once again based off Mii color, which at this point is getting old. And then you needed certain colors to make certain bait, to collect certain fish, which you would need to proceed, and I don't know, I feel like there's better, more straight to the point fishing mini games and various other games, and I'm sure dedicated games. So it was a tough sell. Battleground Z is probably the second best game, I would say. And this is another one. I feel like it would have to be modified a bit. That could have maybe stood out a bit on its own, because there is actually a lot of gameplay, actually almost similar to Mii Force. The different Miis would dictate which weapons you can use, and it could be fun to, switch back and forth between them and see how they all work in that, which you can do on the fly very quickly. And I thought it was cool, too, that sometimes the Mii would team up with you instead of giving you a weapon, and the CPU was actually pretty useful, too. The issue is that was pretty much all there was to the game, and it's kind of like a hack and slash, beat 'em up warriors, Muso, I think that's how you say it, esque game, which I know those games get shit on sometimes for being boring button mashers, but I'll defend them. I think it's fun to go around and manage different bases and try some different combos and build up and unleash big super attacks. This game didn't really have any of that. It's essentially just occasionally dodging and mashing your attack button with whatever weapon you wind up liking best out of the group. But it is, kind of close. With a little more depth, it could have been pretty good. So eventually they released one final set of games, and it included the ability to pick one of 2 games in that set to get for free. These 2 were probably the best games in the set. I wound up picking Market Crashers, which I actually didn't really like at first. But when I went back to it, it's not too bad. It's got a unique theme, and this is a weird comparison, but it almost reminds me of a rhythm game in a way. They'll sort of show you, based on, your Miis, they'll predict how the stocks are going to go, and then you'll try to hit that timing just perfectly to buy low and sell high. And it was actually kind of fun and rewarding to hit it just right. Once again, though, nothing too crazy here. The other selectable free game was Slot Car Rivals, which I think, at least are the people I know, I think that's the game most people wound up picking. But this one was almost kind of similar in a way, except rather than having a minor focus on sort of business management and stuff, it had a minor focus on customizing a slot car racer. And I don't know. I guess these last 2 games, and maybe even some of the ones I listed before, I can almost imagine them as a mini-game in Mario Party and being a pretty fun one at that. It obviously goes more in depth here. I almost feel like this has been, or something similar, has been a Mario Party minigame at some point. But like I said, there's all sorts of different courses, and like I said, there is almost a rhythm to it. But here you can kind of see it a little more, like where you can maybe boost, and when there's a tight turn you might have to brake for. I forget, there may have even been some indicators to sort of help you get a rough range of when to adjust your speeds and such. So like I said, I feel like it was more fun and a little more challenging for Market Crashers, and a little more unique as well. But this was pretty solid too, for what it was. Unfortunately, Street Pass Mii Plaza went out with more of a flop rather than a bang. Feed Me is the first of the final 3. Honestly, this game is, in my opinion, pretty similar to Flower Town, except rather than trying to mix different flower seeds or whatever, you're mixing different ingredients to make certain dishes. Honestly, I think this one may have been a little better, just because I feel like the food aspect of it is more approachable and easier to understand. And I feel like the kind of connection this game had with Find Me was pretty cool too. But I don't know, once again, I feel like there's some sort of making food games that are probably a little better than this. Ninja Launcher, I couldn't even really play. I guess it kind of had a good idea, but I don't know, maybe it's my horrible depth perception, but when they got rid of the guide of what way you're going to shoot out of the cannon, I could not for the life of me get any of the scrolls from the kites to actually, succeed in the game within a reasonable time frame, so I gave up pretty early in this one. Maybe it's better than I give credit for, but I literally just could not play this one at all. And finally, there's Mii Trek, which in my opinion sort of falls in the same category as Warriors way, being that it was just boring and probably very luck-based, hoping you select the right path and are able to clear the levels as quick as possible. And then, like, at first it was like, okay, whatever. But then, after a couple of the main areas, I was sick of it already. And then you clear the first area, and then there's, like, 2 more areas. And I did a little bit of the first area in the second part. And then they have this, like, maze you have to go through, and you only get so many steps based on the Miis you have, and it was just not fun. There was some, like, minor mini games which I think were more around pressing A at a certain time or aiming and pressing A within a time limit, if I remember correctly, which is, not too special or anything. So unfortunately, like I said, things didn't end so well, but I still think this was really cool ideas, some interesting concepts. And actually, even looking at the side, all these different developers you had sort of come together for this. A lot of smaller studios getting a little boost probably from being involved in a pre-built Nintendo thing. Actually, looking through it, doesn't surprise me. Goodfield made most of the good ones. They made Kirby's Epic Yarn in that, which is one of my favorite, if not my favorite Kirby games, definitely up there. They're a pretty good studio. Surprised Spike-chan wound up making Warrior's Way. Kind of expected a little more from them. And Grezzo, which I think did some of the 3DS Zelda games doing Flower Town, is kind of interesting too, actually, because of how similar they almost were. I'm kind of surprised Flower Town and Feed Me weren't the same group. Because actually, yeah, here, Slot Car Rivals and Market Crashers were both good feel. Those were 2 of the other ones I compared. And actually, the other 2, I was sort of comparing some of the concepts of Mii Force and Battleground Z. And there they are, good feel once again. But yeah, hopefully something similar comes back at some point. And if it doesn't, I would recommend, looking into it or maybe trying to experience it yourself if you still can.